Thoreau had another insight that a characteristic of wisdom is not to do desperate things. This was confusing for Gideon, because embedded in each and every one of us is to do great exploits. And Gideon felt that very strongly, to do great exploits. I remember when my son Elijah, when he got saved, he's telling his mother, he says, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something great. I feel like I'm supposed to be calling fire down from heaven or something. There's got to be something. But that's it. All of us have that. We don't want to be living those lives of quiet desperation. You don't have to live that life. Ben, I heard the story. You tell the story about how when you first met Gideon, Gideon walked into the woods and you didn't know why, but you just followed him. And you told me when we were out there, you said, I told Gideon, listen, let's go do something. Whatever you want, I'm with you. Let's go do it. So, Ben, I'm encouraging you, don't wait for another Gideon to rise up. God gave you one. Now you just need to pick up and do it yourself. You need to go forward, and somebody will follow you. We need to be brave. We need to be courageous. Every one of us. We can be so much more than what we are. We're designed to do great exploits. And I'm going to tell you what, right now, I know for some of you who were younger, it's a little bit harder to believe, but some of us here are older and around long enough to know the world didn't used to be like it is now. This is not the same old what's going on right now. And we need to stand up and be counted and make a stand. And that's all I got to share for right now.
It's not all that you got to share. You need to, Sue's going to come. You need to hear what Bob said. This is not farewell. That's a choice that we have to make, and I won't take away from what others say, but there's a big part of living in memory. You know, these two people know him the longest. My son and I, we have an exchange. I say, I love you, and he says, I love you more, and I say, I loved you first. It's the only way out of that.
I know that exchange.
All right. I'm going to just ask you to hold it closer to your mouth. I didn't want to interrupt Bob. But.
Okay. Thank you. Amen. So, first, I just really want to thank everybody for their prayers and for their support in bringing Gideon home. And our next step is to bring his Jeep that he loves so much. We're going to bring that home as well. And so I just want to give my thanks to all of you for that. So a lot of you know Gideon tried to drown some of his sorrows, and it would torment him. And he would call me late at night, for me, 2 o'clock in the morning, Arizona time. And many of those times, Bob was there for these conversations as well. But I always kept contact with, I tried to keep contact with all of my Arizona boys. Some of them would respond. Some of them take days or weeks, but Gideon always responded. And Gideon and I had many conversations when he was younger and growing up, many conversations in my room, and he would share his heart. So he was very special. All of my children are special, but anyway, I just want to share something that Gideon wrote. He had 2 notebooks. An older notebook had many despairing thoughts that he wrote. In his new notebook, I found this writing, and I wrote it out. It was kind of like in a poem form. I lost my desire to get high. And this testifies to what Ben and Ezra said. This shouldn't have happened. He was turning away and getting himself better. I lost my desire to get high. I was always around for the worst. Oh, then the drinking went too, though it took more time to lose. I've been leaning on it for all my life. My little book that I wrote to the roof was all crooked, and so I set it alight. All the weight that I carried from the hate that I buried. So I know he was on that road. So I just want to share about Gideon. His birthday was on November 24th, and I turned 27. And I sent him this cross as a gift with the words on it, I have called thee by thy name, from Isaiah chapter 1. And so when I sent that, I wrote him the story about his birth and just wanted to encourage him, because he would tell me in some of those late night conversations that he just feels lost. And so I'd share with him, well, Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. So you're not lost. Anyway, I told him the story about when he was born, and at the time we didn't know if he was a boy or a girl, and Bob and I had not had any names. Some we named before, some were named after, some, like James, was a long time after, but we wanted to know who the child was and prayed about it. And with Gideon, we didn't, as I said, know he was a boy or a girl. And when the time came for me to give birth, I knew it was time, and these words just came out. And I says, okay, Gideon, it's time to come forth. And a few minutes later, Gideon, I say he came out swimming because I had him in a bathtub at home. My first bathtub baby. So I know that those words were, this child, I put, Gideon, was named by God himself. That I spoke those words out of prophecy. And the words that I have called you by name came to me. And so I wrote those things to Gideon and told him, you know, that God has you, that you belong to him. So Gideon, as in the Bible, Gideon, he had a heart of valor. And we saw that from when he was just a young child begin to come forth. And so I'm just going to share a little story about that. And there's evidence of that back on the table. So we moved to Virginia in '98. Bob had come down and signed papers to close on that deal just a week after Gideon was born. And so 4 years later, we had moved down there, brought most of our possessions, what we could bring down there, and stored them under a tent made of tarps. It was a large area. And we stored them under there as we moved down when there was at least a dwelling place of sorts for us to live in. So after 2 long winters, and then in the second spring, we decided to uncover that and see what had survived. And not much did. And so Bob started a burn pile right outside the back door, and the older guys were carrying stuff out, and the more stuff they carried out, the bigger that fire grew. And at one point, I don't remember which one, but one of my older guys brought to me a box that was in there. And that happened to be a family heirloom that I brought with me that had most of my childhood memories were wrapped around that. And I've known it since Christmas time. It was always set out at Christmas time. And they brought it over, and we opened the box, and these figures was a nativity scene, and the figures were all turned to mush. Just, they lost their color, they were grayish, and they were just turned to mush. And you can still see basically what they were. And Gideon reached in and to touch one of them, and it was the figurine of Mary. And as he did that, just crushed the whole thing down. And so I was really upset about that, because this has been 2 years of struggle here in this place. And so this treasure was gone, and I told my older son, I said, just take it and put it in the fire. And Noah, who was only about maybe just turned 7, and Gideon was like 5.5 years old. And Noah said, you can't do that. And I said, well, there's nothing that we can do for it. It is ruined, and it just has to, we can't, it's ruined. Just throw it in the fire, I told my son, who was still waiting there. And Noah again says, you can't do that. You know, this is Jesus. You can't do that. And I just said, there's nothing to be done. It's ruined. And I got up and walked in the house. I went up to my room and shed my tears there. And a little while later, Gideon comes in, and he tells me, Noah is crying. So I said, well, why is Noah crying? And he said, because you threw Jesus in the fire. So I told him, bring him in, called him in there. I was so distraught, I didn't really even realize how distraught that Noah was. And so we prayed together, we cried together. I told him, well, you can't burn Jesus. Jesus is alive forevermore. And so afterwards, we went to bed that night. That fire burned down to just ashes, smoldering ashes, a large pile of ashes. And at some point, Gideon went out there early in the morning and dug around in those ashes. And he come running in the house with a bright smile on his face, and he's saying, look, calling me, come and look. And he had the donkey from that set. And so we went out, and we dug around some more, and we found most of all those figures that were there. Not only were they whole, they're not mushy and squished down, but they were whole, and the color was restored. And the only one that was still had the damage was Mary, although she also had filled out and was restored. And I believe God left that crack there for us to always remember. And so we thank God for this miracle that had come out of these ashes, and I knew that we would build new memories here. And I also just thank God for hearing the heart of a young child, and for Gideon, who was the guardian of Noah. He felt his grief. He was moved by that. And I don't know what was in his mind when he went out there digging in those ashes, but God let him find those. And for all of us, it was a healing for me. And so that is the heart of Gideon. And I'll share one more story about that. Gideon's heart of value is when 9/11 happened. And now he was maybe approaching 7. And he came in my room, as he often did. And he's upset. And he said, why? why would God allow all those people to die? And why would God allow that? And he couldn't understand. And so I told him, I said, well, there's people in the world and people do bad things. And usually when people do bad things, other people are hurt by that. And so I did explain to him, I says, but not all of those people, I explained to him about if they knew the Lord, if they knew God, that they went to be with him. They're not dead. They're not dead. I said, this body is just a shell, but who you are, your spirit, your soul, is eternal. And so he said, you mean I'm not my body? So I said, no, you are inside there, and the time will come. And so then he said, well, I wish that I was one of those people. And so I said, well, why would you wish that? And he said, well, because then I would be with God. So I said, well, God will pull you, in your time. But he will go around saying, I am not my body. I am not my body. And so he did understand that. And one other thing that I would say, this was when he was older, going to Pathway School, and Noah come in one day and he tells me, well, so I guess you should be pretty proud of Gideon. So I said, well, why is that? So he says, because he's decided to become a righteous dude. And so the story behind that, and it was interesting because going through, I keep a lot of my children's stuff. They'll probably go through my stuff when I die, and why did she keep this? But anyway, I have Gideon's book from Pathway, and they were reading a story, do hard things. And in each chapter, they would have to write what they saw in that. And there was this one chapter, and Gideon actually wrote about making a stand.
Hearing Sue, I've had to say this to another parent. We didn't sign up for this, but we did sign up for this. And the part that I can appreciate, even as Shamala comes in the bond of a sister, our parents see something in us even when we can't see it. And I think that's when we refer to God as Father. I think it was very intentional that he gave those names, Mother and Father, because he sees us with destiny, with intentionality, regardless of the struggles that we entertain. It's good stuff.
Face came to me, and I knew that song was for Gideon. Those words, again, tell me he's okay, he's in heaven, and he is safe and hurting no more.
Oh, you selected the song. I also think that, I forgot to say this, but I think the preciousness of the story of Gideon believing for Noah and finding is that those are anchor points. And I would just call to mind, even as we celebrate and see some stages of life, it's going to bring about some anchor points. These are ways that the Lord really empowers goodbye and close the book. And it's really not the answer, because your soul still grieves. My friend Lindsay made a post, and it showed grief as a ball and life as a bottle. The bottle got bigger. My capacity gets bigger. The grief part doesn't change. It's that as I grow,
legal state that you could buy the real stuff, the good stuff, right? The stuff that actually went up and actually, boom, lit the sky up. And I'm serious. All I can remember is that thinking to myself, we had gone down one 4th of July, and we were there, and it must have been an hour and a half straight. I was timing it because I was like, they can't have any more fireworks. There's no way that these boys made that work. But I'm serious, hour and a half straight. They rivaled Christiansburg and Blacksburg all the way down in Woolwine, Virginia, on that big old field in the open grass, man. I think Julio was actually also to enable us to grieve with hope that you're faithful to Gideon, hope that you're faithful to each one of us, that you're faithful to meet us in this place with your supernatural peace and supernatural comfort, hope that you are and you will comfort this family and these friends. And I pray that each one of us, Lord Jesus, would lean into you today, that we would trust